Okay, I'm going to go over the homework that's on page 3 in your chapter 2 packet, 2.1 to 2.4 and 2.6. So, number 1 asks you to put into order negative 1/2, negative 0.51, 1/25, 0.2, and 3/100ths. Okay, now the first thing I'm going to do to put these in order is separate the negatives from the positives. And actually, in this particular case, the negatives are to the left, the positives are to the right. Because I know any negative, no matter how small or big, is always going to be less than any positive number, no matter how small or big. So now I just have to decide which negative is closer to 0. Now, to do that, I'm going to change my negative 1/2 to negative 0.5 or 0.50. Now, I made it negative 0.50 because now I can compare it to negative 0.51. And the one that's closest to 0 is the bigger one. Well, this is closer to 0. So if I'm going to order it from least to greatest, that would be the smallest, and this would be the next one. Now I have to order these. I have an option. I can change them all to decimals or all to fractions. And I think I'm going to change them all to fractions. So this was 0.2, which was 2/10, but I can write it as 20/100ths, which is bigger than 3/100ths. And 1/25, if I multiply the top and the bottom by 4, becomes 4/100ths. So 3/100ths is the smallest, 1/25 comes next, and 0.2 is the largest. So the way we decided the order was first we went over negative and positive, and then to compare numbers, we either change all the numbers to decimals or all the numbers to fractions. So that's how you would do number 1. I'm going to let you do number 2 and 3 on your own. Now, number 4 tells you that x equals negative 7, y equals 9. And they want to know the absolute value of x. So now I substitute. What's the absolute value of negative 7? Because x equals negative 7. Well, absolute value is the distance from 0, and it's always positive. So this answer would be 7. Now, they want to know the absolute value of the opposite of x. Negative x means the opposite of x. So, if x is negative 7, what's the opposite of negative 7? And the opposite of negative 7 is positive 7. But the absolute value of 7 is still 7, because both 7 and negative 7 are 7 away from 0. Now, number 6 says, what's the opposite of the absolute value of x? So I would just look for the absolute value of x, which was 7. What's the opposite of 7? It's negative 7. Okay, so this exercise is really helping you understand the difference between just absolute value and negative numbers. Now, negative x is number 7. So I want to know the opposite of x. Well, x equals negative 7. What's the opposite of negative 7? The answer is 7. Now, some people like to totally substitute and say, what is minus negative 7? We turn it into plus plus, and it's still 7. I prefer to think of this as the opposite of x. So if x is negative 7, I'm looking for the opposite of negative 7. Okay, number 8, negative x minus y. We know that x equals negative 7, y equals 9. So the opposite of x would be 7. The opposite of y would be negative 9. 7 minus 9 is negative 2. So I can look at this as the opposite of x, the opposite of y. So 7 minus 9, or we can substitute negative 7 minus y. That becomes plus. Either way, we get negative 2. And then, let's see, number 9 is the absolute value of x plus y. I'm going to substitute x is negative 7, y is 9. That becomes the absolute value of 2, which is 2. Okay. Now, number 10 says, what is the opposite of negative 7? Well, opposite means opposite sign, so the opposite sign of negative 7 is 7. 11 says if x is negative 9, what's the opposite of x? Well, if x is negative 9, what's the opposite of negative 9? Opposite means opposite sign, so that would be 9. Number 12 says if x is negative 9, what is negative x? Well, negative x is the opposite of x. So again, 11 and 12 are really the same question, just asked differently. Negative x is saying what's the opposite of x, and the other question literally said what is the opposite of x. So the answer is still 9. And number 12 says if x equals negative 2, what's negative x plus 3? So again, this is the opposite of x, and if x is negative 2, the opposite of negative 2 is 2, so 2 plus 3 equals 5. Okay, so that is page 3.